If you've poked around a modern Linux distro, you've probably seen one of these names in a config file or during setup. SELinux and AppArmor are both security systems that add a layer of control beyond what Linux gives you by default. They solve the same problem in very different ways, and knowing the difference matters once you start hardening real systems. Linux out of the box uses discretionary access control, access control. That means the owner of a file decides who else can read or write it. The problem is what happens when a process running as root gets compromised. It can touch nearly anything on the machine. Mandatory access control, MAC, sits underneath that and enforces rules the administrator defines, not the file owner. Even root-bound processes have to obey. Both SELinux and AppArmor are MAC implementations. They decide what each individual process is allowed to do, regardless of who started it. SELinux was originally developed by the NSA and ships as the default on Red Hat, CentOS, Fedora, and their derivatives. The core mechanism is labeling. Every file, process, directory, and network port gets a security context, something like system U, object arc, TTPT. A policy then defines which labels are allowed to interact. So if your web server runs as HTTP/TT, the policy spells out exactly which file types it can read. SELinux is incredibly granular. You can control network ports, individual sockets, even specific system calls. The trade-off is that policies are written in a specialized language, and debugging a denial usually means digging through audit logs with tools like Audit2Y. It's powerful, but there's a real learning curve. AppArmor takes a fundamentally different approach. Instead of labeling everything on the file system, it profiles individual programs by their file paths. A profile for engine X might say it can read from etc. engine X and write to varlog engine X and nothing else. If the binary tries to touch something outside that list, AppArmor blocks it. This makes policies much simpler to write and reason about. You don't need to relabel your entire file system or learn a specialized policy language. Profiles are human-readable text files. It's the default on Ubuntu, SUSE, and Debian. The trade-off is less granularity. A path-based rule won't catch an attacker who moves or renames a file, whereas a label-based rule still would. This diagram shows the key differences at a glance. SELinux labels every object on the system and enforces broad, system-wide policies, which gives you tighter control, especially over network resources and kernel operations. AppArmor profiles individual programs by path, which is simpler but less exhaustive. Both systems have a learning mode where they log violations without blocking, so you can test the policy before enforcing it. That's how most people get started with I1. For most beginners, the honest advice is this: stick with whatever your distribution ships and learn it well. If you're on a Red Hat derivative, SELinux is already there. If you're on Ubuntu or SUSE, AppArmor is your default. If you're in a regulated environment, PCI DSS, HIPAA, government work. SELinux's granularity is often mandated by auditors and worth the effort. If you just need to lock down a handful of services without investing weeks in learning a policy language, AppArmor gets you protected faster. The real takeaway is that running with either Mac system is a massive step up from relying on DAC alone. Don't let the debate stop you from choosing one. That covers SELinux versus AppArmor at the beginner level. Both add a security layer that Linux permissions alone can't provide. Thanks for watching Awesome Linux TV.